Hello, Mrs. Mikey here. We are continuing our novel unit for the book Holes. Today in class, we read chapter 5. Your homework for today was to finish reading chapter 5, and we are going to do that together. But first, I want to make sure that we're all caught up with the book. And the best way to do that is, of course, to look at a plot diagram. So all novels, right, can be set into our plot diagram. So far in the novel Holes, we're right here at the beginning, right? We just met our characters and we just found out our setting and we're just beginning to have some rising action happening. So speaking of characters, can you tell me about Stanley? So Stanley Yelnats is our main character. What do you remember about Stanley? Can you tell me about what you remember? Was he a good kid? What happened to him? Yes, he was a good kid, but yeah, he was arrested for stealing shoes. Did he really steal the shoes though? No, he did not really steal the shoes. It was all just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Who did Stanley and his whole family blame when anything went wrong? Great grandpa, right? Good. So that's a little bit about Stanley. Who else have we met in the novel Holes? So let's think back. When Stanley arrived at camp, who did we meet? My favorite was Mr. Sir, right? That's an easy name to remember. And then Mr. Podansky, who is the counselor, I guess, in charge of the tent. What can you tell me about him? Compare him to Mr. Sir. Were they nice? Were they not nice? Was one of them nice? Were they both meh? Mr. Podansky seemed to be younger. Yeah, he was a little more friendly, right? Mr. Sir was very strict. And then Mr. Podansky brought him into the tent where he met some of the other boys at camp. Who did he meet at camp? Do you remember anything about them? It was just a little bit we met them. So we're still kind of getting to know them, right? So yeah, we have Squid, not Alan, and X-Ray. Those are two of his bunkmates, right? And that means that they all live in that little like tent. And you can kind of see the tent back here. So these are some of the picture characters that I'm going to use from our Pixton. So this is going to be able to help us, and you guys are going to be able to make your own Pixton characters if you would like as well, and your own plots in Pixton for the novel Holes, which will be something fun to do. But yes, these are some of the characters that we just met in the beginning of our story. Again, we are at the exposition. That is the beginning of our story. This is where our characters are introduced. This is where we learn the setting of our story. This section also presents other facts and things that we need to understand about the story. For example, a little bit of Stanley's family background, which we learned in the first couple chapters. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the setting. So, what was the setting of the novel Holes? Where was Stanley sent? He was sent to the desert. Yes. Anybody remember what state? What was the state? Texas. Yes, he was in Texas. He was in Texas, and it was like a desert, totally dry desert. It was not a summer camp. It was more like this, right? It was more like this, just a desert wasteland. Would he be able to survive out there like that? What do you think? If he's out in a desert like that, could he survive? Were there any fences at this jail out in the desert? Let's take a look at our reading real quick. So down here it says, and this is when Stanley meets Mr. Sir. Take a good look around you, Mr. Sir said. What do you see? Stanley looked out across the vast wasteland. The air seemed thick with heat and dirt. Not much, he said, then hastily added, Mr. Sir. Mr. Sir laughed. You see any guard towers? No. How about an electric fence? No, Mr. Sir. There's no fence at all, is there? No, Mr. Sir. You want to run away? Do you want to run away, Mr. Sir? Asked him. Stanley looked back at him, unsure what he meant. If you want to run away, go ahead, start running. I'm not going to stop you. Stanley didn't know what kind of game Mr. Sir was playing. I see you're looking at my gun. Don't worry, I'm not going to shoot you. He tapped his holster. This is for yellow-spotted lizards. I wouldn't waste a bullet on you. I'm not going to run away, Stanley said. Good thinking. Nobody runs away from here. We don't need a fence. Know why? Because we've got the only water for 100 miles. You want to run away? You'll be buzzard food in 3 days. What is the setting of this story? How does the setting affect the story? If they're in a desert, the kids aren't going to run away. They don't need guns. They don't need fences. So we're going to focus a lot more on the characters. Okay. And we're going to find out why they're out in this desert. And I'm sure the heat, of course, is one of our conflicts, right? Man against nature. Who will survive, man or the heat? All right. It is time for us to pick up and read the rest of chapter 5. 7 crates were stacked in 2 piles at one side of the tent. The open end of the crates faced outward. Stanley put his backpack, change of clothes, and towel in what used to be Barf Bag's crate. It was at the bottom of the stack that had 3 in it. Squid returned with 4 other boys. The first 3 were introduced by Mr. Pendansky as Jose, Theodore, and Ricky. They called themselves Magnet, Armpit, and Zigzag. What do we call that when we don't use our formal name? Sometimes our friends will give us maybe you have a nickname? Yeah, they have nicknames, so they go by nickname. Now, I know you guys, how many of you guys are a little bit lost because there's lots and lots of characters? I totally get that. There are lots of characters, and that is fine because we are going to create character sketches and we will use those so that we can keep organized with our characters. Okay? So, what's happening in the tent with the boys? Stanley looked at the ground. Mr. Pendansky left the tent, and soon the other boys began to file out as well, taking their towels and change of clothes with them. Stanley was relieved to be left alone, but he was so thirsty he felt as if he could die if he didn't get something to drink soon. Hey there, Theodore, he said, going after him. Do you know where I can fill my canteen? Theodore whirled and grabbed Stanley by his collar. My name's not Theodore, he said. It's Armpit. He threw Stanley to the ground. And that's Mom, a boy said. Okay, so what does this little exchange tell you about Armpit? Right? He said, Theodore whirled and grabbed Stanley by his collar. My name's not Theodore, he said. It's Armpit. And he threw Stanley to the ground. What does that tell us about Armpit's personality? So, when we create a character sketch, it's going to look something like this. So, we know that he is called Armpit, not Theodore. And what was your first impression of him? Maybe a little angry, a little bit maybe violent, right? All right, not exactly very friendly. Okay. Now we're going to see, does he change throughout the story, or did we just maybe misinterpret him? So we'll be able to discover a little bit more about our characters. But so one of our characters here is going to be Armpit. Let's keep reading. Stanley stared up at him, terrified. There's a water spigot on the wall of the shower stall. Thanks, Armpit, said Stanley. As he watched the boy turn and walk away, he couldn't for the life of him figure out why anyone wanted to be called Armpit. In a way, it made him feel a little bit better about having to sleep in a cot that was used by somebody named Barfback. Maybe it was a term of respect. So these characters definitely have some interesting names, don't they? I think they probably are going to have some interesting personalities to go along with it. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I definitely want you guys to be focused on learning a lot about the characters and really how the characters are acting toward each other in the story. Okay, we're going to be focusing on the characters now that we are being introduced to them. So, tomorrow we will read the next chapter and do some more character descriptions. All right, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.